Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Grayson Garvin. My guest on today's episode is Allen Huggins, founder and owner of WH Properties, a residential real estate brokerage in Nashville, Tennessee. Allen is a friend and a very successful entrepreneur, but what makes Allen unique is his tenacity towards doing the things required to be successful. I hope you enjoy this interview, and without further ado, let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Grayson Garvin, and today my guest is a good friend. I'm really excited about this conversation, Allen Huggins. So, Allen, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh man, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here with you and excited to talk a little bit.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Well, as I was thinking back and getting prepared for this episode, was really thinking back to our relationship. And, we first met, which is coming on about a decade now, which makes me feel pretty
Yeah.
old. But
You,
you were really instrumental in helping me get connected post baseball. I remember starting with some of, my networking meetings. And I remember our first interaction. We actually had lunch together at Chipotle off White Bridge Road, if
that's
you
right.
remember that.
I do.
But you've been instrumental in, again, in helping me get connected here in the Nashville kind of marketplace. And so I'm so thankful for you and for that. So really excited for you to
Yeah.
be able to, to share your story with our audience today.
Likewise, likewise. I appreciate everything you've done for me. It's been an awesome relationship. I know for me, and I can honestly say it sounds like it is for you. And I just it's been one of those things where when you meet somebody that you just vibe with and you just have a good feeling about, it makes it easy.
Yeah, that's right. 100%. Absolutely. Well, tell us, to start, tell us a little bit about where we find you today. Tell us a little bit about where you live. Tell us about your
Yeah.
family and tell us about what you do for work.
Awesome. So I own a small brokerage on the west side of Nashville off White Bridge Road called WH Properties. It is a full service real estate firm. We primarily do residential. I've been in the real estate game with other brokerages since 2003. So I'm about to celebrate 21 years in the business, which is absolutely wild, but it's pretty awesome. And in 2017, I started my own brokerage over here. I've got a team of five other folks that work with me, from other agents to director of ops, director of marketing, stuff like that. Family wise, I met my wife Maggie at the University of Georgia. We got married, the 17 years in April, which is just again crazy. And we have two kids. We have a 13-year-old boy and a 9-year-old daughter. Both are into music in some capacity. Our son plays bass and our daughter sings in a little band, which is kind of fun. And I've actually been singing recently in a dad band, a bunch of the dads that have kids at this certain spot where my kids go called Bach to
I
Rock.
love it.
We all got together and played a show about 2 months ago, and it was a blast. I played in college and had a great time doing that, and had a great time, honestly, singing the other day. But yeah, that's it. I'm a big golfer, as I know you know. You and I've gotten out a few times, and planning to get out hopefully soon. But that's my big hobby. If I'm not in the real estate office or with my family, I'm out on a golf course somewhere. So our course is shut down right now, so I'm kind of bumming off of buddies. But I'll get back to it soon enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, again, being in the real estate space, specifically residential, for as long as you have, that's a big accomplishment. And, the Pursuit podcast, what we talk about here is really about the journey. And so it's easy, I think, to probably look at you now and kind of what you've done and what you've started. And you have a team of
Yeah,
people and you're doing, you know, X amount of business a year. Um, Talk to me though, or talk us through a little bit more of kind of the process to get to where you are, because I think it's
yeah,
easy for folks to look at real estate. I think real estate is kind of a sexy asset, for lack of a better term. And you see
sure.
the shows like Million Dollar Listing and Selling Sunset and the fast cars and the custom suits and all of that stuff. But in reality, it's not always like that. And so you've been successful yourself, but talk us through a little bit about what it's taken you to get to where you are today.
Well, I think you know me well enough to know that that's not my game, right? The flashy cars and all that stuff. I have a nice car, don't get me wrong, but I don't have any kind of flashy car. What somebody may say is a flashy car. Um, Real estate is definitely vastly different than those shows, as I know you know. But um, I started in 2003 with a local brokerage, and I was grateful to have a lot of family in the business. My uncle specifically, he was the broker and the owner of this company, and I learned everything getting started through him, right? I mean, I learned how to start a database. I learned how to talk to your clients. I learned how to sell. I mean, when you go into real estate, when I went into real estate, I didn't want to be a salesperson, right? I didn't think that a salesperson was a bad word in my book, right? And so when I got into business, Neil taught me really how to sell without acting like a salesperson, right? How to kind of own it and make it your own. And so I was fortunate enough, and I say fortunate because I learned a ton and it's helped me in the last few years, kind of watching the ebbs and flows of the market. But I was fortunate enough to go from '03 to kind of middle late '06 in a good market. And then, as we all know, in '07 and '08, the market crashed. Now, the beauty of Nashville and Middle Tennessee in general is during that time, the overall average was 22% of how much equity people had lost. The values of homes had come down 22% nationwide. In Nashville, we were only down about 9%. But even then, we still thought the sky was falling because we'd never seen prices like that or price reductions like that. You had a lot of people in trouble. It was just a really tenuous market. Um, Nashville again was very fortunate that in about 2010 started coming back out of it. And at that time in 2008, I hired a coach. I hired a coaching program that at the time was based out of Michigan, moved to North Carolina, and it was strictly for realtors and lenders. And this coaching program I was in up until about a year and a half ago. And so almost 15 years within this coaching program. And it's not rocket science what they teach, but what they teach is accountability. And they teach you the basics of running a business and selling and that kind of stuff. But they also teach you accountability to yourself, accountability to your team, accountability to your clients, just accountability to doing the work. Because what I found in 21 years of doing this is that I can tell realtors all over the country and even in my own market exactly what they need to do. And the fact of the matter is 95% of them won't do it. They may do it for a couple months and then it gets hard and they go back to their old habits. And so hiring a coach in 2008 was probably one of the most instrumental parts of my journey because it gave me somebody else to look up to. It gave me somebody else to be accountable to. You and I both played sports, you far more competitively than I, but, uh, but I will say having a coach in sports was very similar. I'm the kind of guy that I don't want to let my coach down. I want to make sure that my coach is happy about what I'm doing. And so for me, it was a good opportunity to push me out of my comfort zone, to make me and force me to do things that I wasn't necessarily comfortable doing, but that in the end would help me grow immensely. And so the growth from 2008 to 2012 for me was probably one of the biggest jumps, just because I went from kind of plateauing at, let's just call it 7-ish million a year to by 2012, I was closing well over 25 million a year. So in a 4-year period, I quadrupled,
It's
my
a
my
big jump.
volume. Yeah. And so from 2012 to now, I've kind of doubled since then and over doubled since then. But as you grow, it's not the hockey or what do we say, the hockey stick like it used to be. It's kind of more of a flatter line. But as long as
Right.
you're ticking in the right direction, it's good. So fast forward from 2012, Nashville was fortunate enough to kind of get their 2006 pricing back by 2012. And so from 2012, quite frankly, until now, really up until last year, we saw a positive market. Last year, Nashville overall pricing wise was still up 4.5%. Volume was down. I think it was ended up being like 12 or 14%, but the pricing was up, 4.5%. But all that being said, within that good market, I learned how to run a business, to run a team. I started a team in '08 with an assistant. I went through 2 or 3 assistants and then hired a woman who is still with me today, a little over 10 years ago. And I grew the team from there. So I have four people specifically that are more admin type. So I would say within a 2-year period, I hired everybody and everybody's been with me ever since. So, quite frankly, to be
Sign of a good
brutally
leader right
honest,
there.
I don't know what I would do without them. And if one of them decided to leave for whatever reason, I don't know what I would do to replace them because when you've had the same employees for 10 plus years, there's a family dynamic that just you can't recreate.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about where we're headed. But that same crew was at the old office with me, and then in 2017 we decided to break away and start our own firm. So I've owned WH Properties now for almost it'll be 7 years in May. which is crazy to think. I mean, it's crazy to think that you and I've known each other 10 years, much less I've had my own business for 7 of those. So, um, and it's been great. We're a small shop. We want to keep it that way. Opened 2 years ago. We opened up a property management side of our business, which has been phenomenal. We saw about 60 to 65% growth in that last year, and honestly, we're expecting more growth from that this year. So, really trying to create different avenues of income as it stands now, and I think I'm pretty well set. I want to get into the development game at some point in the near future, but with mortgage rates, and interest rates where they are, it's not really conducive to speculative building and such. So
For
we'll see
sure.
where it takes us. But
For
that's
sure.
in a nutshell, that's kind of where I started, and how I've gotten to where I am now.
No, I love it. I love it. So walk us through too your decision to start your own brokerage, because I would say too, and obviously we know each other well, but looking at the macro real estate, specifically residential space, that's rare for people to do. It's normally they're at, a big box shop, and they're, working under a larger umbrella. What were some of the reasons behind you stepping out and doing your own thing?
Yeah, I had always wanted to kind of run my own shop, and I'd wanted that for a while. The dynamic that was tough for me was the family dynamic. I had an uncle who was my boss and broker. I had two cousins that worked in there, or really three cousins that worked in the office with us. So the hardest part for me was just the family dynamic and kind of navigating that. But the piece of it that a mentor of mine told me when I finally made the decision was, you could sell a certain amount of real estate in your sleep. You've got the systems and the structure to be able to just focus, albeit not all your time like you normally do, but you can focus a large percentage of your time on getting that business. And even without, taking the first year or so to focus on just getting the business off the ground, you'll still have plenty of income and sales to be able to kind of keep everything afloat. And so that was a really big piece of, just security blanket, I guess, for me, was just kind of knowing that, hey, look, I can sell enough to keep the doors open. Right. So I can take that first year, and between 2008 and 2017, when I started, or let's say 2018, that was the only year that I dipped in sales, and I only dipped by 10%. So it wasn't like I took this massive hit. And so every year since then has been better and better and better up until last year. And last year we were down, the nation average was down like 38% as far as realtors are concerned, and we were down 2%. So I consider that a massive win. I told the crew when the year started, if we're down 10%, I'd be happy. And we were down two. So um, those and knowing and having the security blanket of knowing that my team's got my back, and if I can just bring in the leads and get the deals, they can take care of the rest. That was a huge, like I said, security blanket for me to get this off the ground, because that first year, as I know, because you've started your own shop, that first year, there's a lot of things that, quite frankly, I just didn't think about. I
You don't
didn't
know what you
know
don't know.
exactly. And whether it's with the state or getting licensure, or, hey, you have to have a certain type of insurance now. Oh, crap. What do I need to do? Well, you need to go get this and this and this. Well, that's a half a day right there. I just lost a half a day of prospecting to be able to have to go do this. And then, setting up signs and having to buy my own lock boxes and all the things that my broker took it care of for me. I was all of a sudden the broker having to do all that. So, um, but quite frankly, having enough friends in the business and having enough people that I trust that I could bounce ideas off of, it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a 2 to 3 year grind where I was going to be constantly putting this together. And quite frankly, kudos to my team, because when we got started, the building that we're in, what I'm in right now, it wasn't done yet. I had bought the building. The contractor thought we could get in by the end of May. We weren't into it by mid July. So we worked out of my mom and dad's living room for what, 4 months, 3 months. So, I mean, it was little hiccups like that just happened. And it's kind of like, hey, we gotta pivot. We got to move together. And like I said, kudos to my team, because they pivoted with us. They kept it. And to your comment earlier about a good leader, I think that if you can create that buy-in with your team, that's a big piece of it. And so one of the things that I've always done is when I interview for somebody for a new position, my crew gets a veto. So they interview with me first for 15, 20 minutes, and then they go interview with my entire team, and I am out of the room. I'm not even there. And my team knows that, like, hey, if even one of you has a veto power and wants to veto, that's cool. They're out. It is what it is, because we've built this great culture of people that will move and shake together. And I'm not going to bring in somebody that's going to muddy that culture. So
Yeah,
that helped
absolutely.
tremendously.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to go back to one thing that you mentioned, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. I was going to bring it up anyway. We do some due diligence beforehand. Obviously, Alan and I do know each other, but you talked about hiring your coach in 2008 being kind of a watershed moment for you in your career. And we believe here at this podcast, and I think, again, growing up in team sports, I'm a big believer in community and doing life together, because we're just, if we're really honest with ourselves, we can go far, to get, or we can go far alone rather, but we can go faster and farther together.
100%.
But you mentioned that again for a little bit of time, a lot of realtors or really anybody in sales, right, can do can do hard things, but as time continues to go on, 50, 70, 85, 95% of people just aren't willing to do what it takes to be
Yeah.
successful. And I think that especially in a sales centric environment, what's required at a foundational level really isn't that hard to grasp, right?
No.
It's really not that hard to grasp. But knowing you the way that I do, you are a master of being able to be out in the community, develop relationships, and build rapport and trust with people, so that when opportunities do present themselves, you and your team and your company come front of mind. And so what I want to ask is, what is the quote hard work required in your industry that again may not be that hard at a, again, foundational level, but most people aren't
Yeah.
willing to put in the work?
Yeah. The amount of prospecting that it takes in my business is something that, if you're a fly by night realtor, you're going to get, let's just call it a deal or two a quarter, just by knowing people and them knowing that you're in the business. That's not my mentality. You know me well enough. I'm super competitive. I want all the deals. I know that I'm not right for everybody, but I doesn't mean I didn't want the deal, right? And so for me, it comes down to prospecting. Like, I have to be on the phone 1 to 2 hours a day, and most agents hate the phone. I'm not going to lie.
1 to 2 hours a day, folks. That is a
I
lot.
hate the phone. I don't like it. My wife jokes that, like, you love being on the phone. I really don't. I'm on the phone a lot, but that's because I know I have to. And so the biggest thing that my coach got me used to, and it's funny that we'll talk about my podcast later, but one of my partner on that, he and I've talked about, if I were to start a business today, knowing what I know, what would I do differently than I didn't do before? And my first thing was get comfortable on the phone. It took me a solid 6, 7 years before I got really comfortable on the phone. Right. And so I have found that if I do my due diligence, and I stay accountable to myself to make those calls, whether it's my VIPs, who are my kind of like guys like you, who refer me a lot of business, who are just people I want to be around, I want to kind of learn from, my past clients, my current clients, all those kind of people. If I know I call a certain amount of those people every single week, I know that the business is going to come in. But when you get in on a Monday morning and you know that for 2 hours on a Monday, you're going to have to be on the phone, there's nothing worse. It's miserable. It's like, I'm sitting here. I mean, today you and I are filming. It's dreary outside. It's like, this is not the day I want to be sitting there slogging through a bunch of phone calls. But you know what? I have to. And so one of my mentors out of Sacramento, California, and he told me years ago, he said, the best piece of advice I ever received when I first started in the mortgage business. I said, okay. He said, my mentor said, you go call 20 people a day for 1 month. Do that 5 days a week for 1 month, and then I'll give you the rest. He goes, no, 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 no. Just start giving it, filtering it to me slowly but surely. He goes, no, 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 no. You prove to me that you can call 20 people a day, 5 days a week for 1 month, then I'll know that you've got the diligence to be able to get it done. And so Todd took it, went and ran with it. He runs one of the largest mortgage companies in America now, and he is uber successful. But he said it's the simple things like that, just being able to call 20 people a day for 5 days a week and having the diligence to do that for 1 full month. It takes a lot of hard work. And so if you look at my calendar from yesterday, I literally had a 7 o'clock and my last was at 4:30. I had two 15-minute breaks in between. I wasn't able to make a single phone call. Well, what does that mean? It means I got to double up today, right? So this afternoon is almost blocked fully with phone calls just because I didn't get my Tuesday calls in. So I got to make them on Wednesday and I got to make my Wednesday calls. So it's the diligence and the accountability. I keep coming back to that word because for me, that was the biggest thing that kept me in coaching as long as it did, because I was fearful that if I didn't have somebody holding me accountable, that I would fall back into my old vices. And I found over the last year and a half that there's a couple times I find myself slipping a little bit, but I read a couple great books, Mindset and Atomic Habits. And those two books have helped me kind of reframe everything, mindset especially. And then Atomic Habits have really helped me to know the 4 or 5 things that are paramount to me running a successful business and putting those in the forefront of everything else. And so those are the biggest things that a coach really helped instill in me, was that diligence, that accountability, and just that at all costs. I'm going to get this done at all costs. So it was, I don't know that I would have seen the growth that I saw, and it put me where I am today, because my biggest thing with my coach, and you know me, and I know you're the same. I'm a big family man, with my wife and kids. If I'm, like I said, if I'm not working, I'm not on the golf course, I'm with them. We just took the kids to Maui. We're taking them to Hilton Head. Like, we want our kids to be able to travel and see parts of the country and parts of the world. Well, I've got to be able to step away from my business and get it all done in maybe a shorter amount of time that most people can get it done, so that I can go do these things with my family. And so I have found that the coaching program showed me how to build a great team, utilize the team's time and talents to take so much of that busy work off of my plate, so that I can come in, get my work done, and get out. Right. I take my kids to school every morning. I pick them up 2, 3 days a week. That's what I want to do. I don't want to be behind a desk making phone calls all day, every day. I know I have to, but at the same time, I want to do all that so that then I can go be a dad and be a husband.
Yeah. Yeah. You're doing what other people aren't willing to do to be successful. Right. And,
That's right.
again, you talked about accountability. Again, what your coach was keeping you accountable for is not rocket science. It's
No.
not rocket science, but each of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, I believe, again, left to our own devices, it's like we're probably going to fall into a path of least resistance pattern. That's just human
100%.
nature. And I think that, it's important too for successful people or driven people to also have that mindset, because, yeah, you may be able to do a lot yourself, but imagine what could be done if
Yeah.
again, linked arms with somebody else or a group of other people, a mastermind or a coach or whatever it
Yeah.
might be. So, no, I think that's really good wisdom. Another thing too that you mentioned that I want to, double tap on, and you obviously had a real estate history before starting WH Properties, but you kind of alluded to the fact that, you expected things to be harder for 2 or 3 years, and maybe it was hard or a little bit of a slug for a year. And granted, running your business always creates, you know, potholes that you don't expect. But in my own experience, I've also seen a similar thing, that before we go do something that seems audacious, I think oftentimes in our brains, we picture things to be a lot worse than inevitably they actually end up becoming. And I
100%.
think especially as it relates to quantifying risk, it's like
Mhm.
starting a business is risky, right?
Yep. Yep.
Well, you talked a little bit about the sales that you had. When you think about, okay, what's the worst case scenario? Well, the worst case scenario is, okay, we lose our house, my kids can't eat and they can't go to school, and like that would probably be like a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Well, no, knowing you, it's like that was not a reality in your case, right? So the worst that happens is, okay, WH Properties fails, and then what? You go back to another brokerage?
There you go.
It's like, and I've had a similar type of thought process in getting us to where we are today with our firm. And
Mhm.
I think that that's just a really important thing to point out, because I think that when you really want to go build something, when you really want to create something, if you really want to build wealth for yourself, it it takes a little bit of that step.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the step is not as painful as it may seem on the forefront.
100%. I had a guy tell me years ago, I was what ifing myself to death, right? And he finally, I'd gone down this laundry list of what ifs, if this happens and then this happens and this happens. And he looks at me dead in the eye and he just goes, "What if the first thing doesn't happen? You're worrying about something 8 clicks down the road, and this first one doesn't even happen. So why are you worried way down here when you need to just worry about this little thing right here? This is the only thing you need to worry about. If this doesn't happen, none of these other dominoes fall. And I was like, that's pretty simple, you know? But at the same time, it was great advice because it was like,
Yeah.
why am I so anxious and worried about all this stuff way down here when I, I don't even know if this domino is going to fall? And if this domino doesn't fall, then none of these other ones are. Right. And
Yeah.
I find myself getting in there a lot. And I revert back to this comment that this gentleman made because it is a great comment, right? It's like I do this to myself all the time, not just at work. I do it to myself in family stuff. I have to catch myself and just be like, oh, domino number one is not going to fall. So if it doesn't fall, then who cares about the other stuff? Let's just worry
Yeah.
about domino number one.
Yeah.
So
That's right. No, 100%. So as you sit here now today, again, you're running a successful brokerage. You've essentially, you know, you've doubled your revenue from those two spots that you mentioned twice over. So again, things are going, quite well for yourself now. So sitting here now saying that you're a driven person, saying that again, you're continuing to make your phone calls, you're wanting to continue to grow. For Allen Huggins in 2024, what does success look like and how is that measured for you?
during through the coaching program that I was a part of, we always started every year. We had two events, one in May that was more sales based, and then one in November that was always more planning based. And the November one I really loved because kind of gives you a minute to reflect on the year, at least 10 and a half months of the year, and then look forward to the next 12 months, right? And kind of put together that plan. And it was 7 boxes, right? It was work, money, spiritual, family, friends, self, and I'm blanking on the last one, but there were 7 boxes, right? We called them the wheel of life. So you had 7 spokes in this wheel, and you kind of graded yourself on, hey, where are you in? If you snapshot it right now, what that looks like. And so I've still used that, even though I'm out of the coaching program. I still use it with my team because, again, I want to create a well-rounded life. I don't want to pass away. I had a friend pass away recently, young, 54 years old, massive heart attack. And it made me start to realize like something like that happens to me. What do I want to be known as? Right. I don't want to be known as a realtor. Like I want to be known as a good person who raised good kids, who was a good husband. That's what I want to be known for. So I know though, as we've spoken about before, to do that, I have to work and I have to be a good realtor and I have to make money to be able to support my family and what we're doing. So when you ask me about what success looks like right now, success to me is if I'm talking about my family, I want to go on 2 trips with my wife, just the two of us. I want to go on 2 other trips with my kids. There's another thing. When you're talking about real estate, I want to make sure that we close a certain amount of real estate. I want to close, my goal is 60. We put it up on the board at 56, but I want to close 60. I've never hit 60 million, right? I want to get there. When you're talking about money, I want to talk about getting into development world. I want to buy my first development piece, right? So there's a lot of things that go into it. The other piece is like personally, I want to work out 3 days a week. I've got a great boot camp, that a group of people that we all support each other. It's kind of another accountability group. But it's great because it gets me out of the bed at 5:30 Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to get in the gym at 6, get my butt kicked for an hour, and then get back to it. Right. But I mean, I think I've been doing the boot camp now for 6 months. I mean, I feel like a new person. I come in, I had tatted this morning. You don't want me to stand up right now because I'm sore as all hell. But it is fun because it makes me I know I'm going to get better and better and better. And so I don't personally, when I say what does success look like this year, I don't base it off of one thing, whether it's real estate or whatever. It's kind of a fuller picture for me. It's like if I can have 2 trips with my kids and 2 trips with my wife, sell the amount of real estate we want to do and get into uh, development, work out 3 days a week, there's success, man. Because it's the 1%, right? If you get 1% better every single day, by the end of the year, you're 365% better than you were at the beginning of the year, right? 1% is nothing. It's all just a step, right? So if I can get 1% better every single day and have that as my mindset, dude, sky's the limit.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, what you're describing too is, it's a multifaceted definition of success. And I think that the people that are the most successful, it's not they're honing in on one thing, whether it's vocationally or family or personal or spiritual. There's all kinds of things that people are striving for. on a regular basis. And what ends up happening is, and what you're alluding to, is that you end up becoming a more well-rounded person, which I think at the end of the day is what all of us are really striving for.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully it rubs off on our kids, right? I mean, that's to create a next generation
Hope
of good
so.
people. That's right. You know, what's funny, and you'll know this when as your kids get older, you might be see it in your older ones right now, but like, when my kids come home from school, sometimes they can be real jerks, right? I mean, it pains me. I'm like, you're not this type of person. But then I see them out in the public with other people and with other adults, and I'm like, oh, you are a good person. Some of this is actually rubbing off on you. So this feels good. Okay.
Yeah,
But it is
that's right.
funny. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's right. Well, as we kind of wind down today, I have a couple more questions. One, and you alluded to this a little bit from a business perspective, but I'd love to know, at your age, what do you wish that, you know, 22-year-old Allen knew as he was stepping into the workforce that he didn't know that you know now that
yeah.
would have saved you a lot of headache and heartache within your 20 plus years of real estate?
Two things, and they kind of go hand in hand. One, in most instances, you can't just throw money at it to make it work. It does take hard work to get it to work. And what I alluded to earlier, if I had at 22, 23, when I joined the workforce, if I had gotten comfortable with the phone before the age of 30, I would be in a far different place than I am today. We had a broker, a guy come in who would run a bunch of companies when I was probably 2 years in the business. And he told me even then, he's like, you get comfortable on the phone, making a lot of phone calls and you'll make a ton of money and you'll crush it in this game. And I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't think anything of it. It didn't take until 3 years later when I joined a coaching program and they were like, you have to get on the phone. We're going to hold you accountable to being on the phone. I'm 30 years old at that point, and I'm sitting there going, man, and I saw the hockey stick at that point. So
Right.
if I'm re-entering the workforce, as a 22, 23-year-old, college grad, it's if you're in a sales position, you better get used to being on the phone because that is the cheapest way and the most effective way to build a sustainable business. My biggest fear is with a lot of the marketing and real estate and just overall going online and to Instagram and YouTube and Facebook and all these different sites, we're losing the sense of relationship. And I think as well as most, that's where my bread and butter is. That's where my business really gets its wings is in the relationships that I've built. And I've done that over time. I'm not a guy that's going to see 20, 25% growth year on year. That's just not my business. I'm going to see 5 to 10% every single year. From 2019 to 2020, we rose, I think, 12%. And I was like, whoa, that was a big year.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
see these guys jump up from 10 million to 40 million, and you're going, I hope he can sustain it because that's a lot
Right.
of deals. So
Yeah.
that's what I want to do. I want to create the relationship so that if in the future my business does shift away from brokerage and more into development or whatever, some other piece of real estate, I still have all those relationships that can benefit me in other ways, right? Even if it's just to have a buddy to go play golf
Yeah.
and,
Well,
and
the
get away
relational
from it
equity
for a minute.
piece, yeah, I mean, the relational equity piece is so big, again, because you're in a sales business. A lot of people would say that ultimately I'm in a sales business, but
Yeah,
first
absolutely.
and foremost, people do business with those that they like and trust, period.
Mhm.
And especially I would say in the more commoditized the industry, and we both live in one of those,
Yep.
that how important that relational equity is to get people over the line. And so I think too, and we, for those that don't live in Nashville, we also, live in a very relational town.
Hmm.
So it's a relational town. We're ultimately in relational businesses. And, again, the relational capital that we can have with prospects, clients, centers of influence, just
Yeah.
contacts. It's so incredibly important. But, Alan, to your point, to put in the work is it's not something that a lot of people are willing to do. And at the end of the day, it can be exhausting. It also
Yeah.
fills your cup in a lot
Totally.
of ways to build good relationships, but
Totally.
it's tiring and exhausting. And that's why, again, most people aren't willing to do it.
Well, and I tell people all the time, like if I'm starting a relationship with somebody, it's not always about the real estate deal. It's not always about, hey, how many leads can this person give me?
For
And I
sure.
use this as an example. I have 5 employees, three of which I have found through my database, right? How cool is that when somebody like yourself can call me up and go, hey, you told me you were looking for a director of ops. this great friend of mine, she's amazing. She'll be an awesome director of ops. I'm going to send her your way. And I can have a warm relationship almost already built in because of the relationship that you and I have. And I mean, that's exactly Rachel, who is my current director of ops. That's exactly how I found her. I put it out to
Yeah.
my database that, hey, I'm hiring for a executive assistant. One of my best friends said, hey, my wife's best friend is looking to get back in the job force. She had kids. She's ready to get back. Rachel's been with me 10 years now and been the best thing
Yeah.
that ever happened in my business. So
Yeah.
it's just things like that, that so many people, when I tell them what we're doing from a relational standpoint, it's like, see past that little focus on the real estate deal and see all the other ancillary things that can come from this relationship.
That's right. Yeah, I think that's the way it has to be. The way that I
Correct.
approach it is, I think about it's if I'm sitting in front of someone, if I'm sitting in front of you, Alan, my goal is to provide you value. Whatever that looks like, my goal is to provide you value. Can business ultimately come from that? Maybe,
Yeah.
but I think that if you have there's an awesome book, The Go Giver, that
Yeah.
speaks a
Love that
lot
one.
to this, where it's, if I can provide you value, or the person that I'm sitting across from, if I can find some way to provide value, good things ultimately happen, business or
100%.
otherwise. But I think having that kind of a mindset
Yep.
really allows that relational equity rather, to be built in such a way to where there
Yep.
can be trust, right? And
Yep.
trust created over time, there's a lot of good synergies that can happen from
Oh,
that.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, as we close today, that I'm in finance, and this is not at all a financial podcast. However, I love to sprinkle in a little bit of finance as we close up today.
Love it.
And so the question that I ask every one of our guests is, do you remember the first thing that you saved for when you were a young kid?
Yes. When I was a young kid,
Yep. Or just the first
ooh,
thing that you remember saving for, period.
a new set of golf clubs.
Love it.
I had a pair of Tommy Armour 845s that I had from probably my junior year of high school. And I played with those through college, the little bit that I played in college, then moving back to Nashville. And I'll never forget, in my second year in real estate, I had a couple, larger size deals closed, larger for me at the time. And I'll never forget going to Music City Golf over here near my office. And I'll never forget walking in there and seeing this set of Mizunos that I was like, man, I hit them on the thing and I loved them. They felt right. And I asked the guy, what's the price? And he told me the price. I was like, all right, I'll be back in a month or two and I'm going to buy these things. And I'll never forget getting that paycheck, paying the taxes from it and going, okay, I finally have enough. Going back down to Music City Golf and buying those irons. It was really cool. It was something to think. I still remember the sales guy, who's funny enough still there. Like it's just so many great memories. So
I love that. Well, for a golfer, again, I recently got new sticks myself, and yeah, for a golfer to get new sticks, I mean, you're like a kid in a candy store or a
oh,
kid on Christmas morning. It's
1000%.
a pretty special feeling. It's a pretty special feeling. Well, Alan, thanks so much for coming on today. Thanks so much for your wisdom.
Yep.
Guys, if you need a real estate professional, specifically in the Nashville area, but any way that Alan can help, please reach out to him. But, Alan, thanks so much for your friendship and also your time today. We really appreciate it.